Hey y'all, it's Manny, and today I'm going to talk about hiking when it's wet outside. I'm going to cover the range of conditions that you would encounter, anywhere from dealing with a short rain shower on a day hike in warm or hot weather to spending multiple days in the snow. Uh, why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I did the Pacific Crest Trail last year, and I did work through all of the situations that I'm going to speak to, and it's information that I myself would have found useful hearing it before I went on the hike. So I'm putting it out there. Perhaps somebody will use it moving forward, because I do think I have a couple critical tips, particularly when it comes to spending longer term exposure, uh, multiple days in wet conditions, because I think some of the products that you might be drawn to that are on the shelf, Gore-tex type shoes, I just don't think that they actually will get the job done and protect your feet and keep them dry. But let's get started. I think on day trips, warm conditions, typical hiker is going to have no problem when we're talking 50, 60, 70 degrees and more, getting their feet wet, getting back in the car at the end of the day. They can use just a regular old tennis shoe. Now, right now I've got on some New Balance Leadville 1210s. I love these shoes. I put 700 miles on them back in the desert section of the PCT. They were great. For those that want to keep their feet dry at all costs, I would recommend waterproof socks. Those are fantastic. The only moisture you seem to get inside the socks are from the sweat on your feet from putting in the work. But they do work well. I don't have any here to show you at the moment, but there's a variety of brands. I used a couple generic waterproof socks that were built for cyclists while on the PCT. Used them throughout the whole stretch of the thing, actually, until towards the end. I burnt a hole in one of my pairs trying to dry them out. But they work great if you wear them multiple days in a row. So by the second or third day, at least for me, the waterproof socks started to wear into my feet, create some sores that I didn't have under any other conditions throughout thousands of miles at this point using regular shoes. So that's something to be aware of. Just really not a concern. I remember training for the PCT and kind of reading up on it, being concerned about the Sierra section. What would it be like getting my feet wet all the time? And really, I found myself and many others just stomping through the streams, getting the feet wet. And even though there might be snow around, we might be walking on snow, the air temperature was to the point where I never really had a problem with my feet getting cold. I mean, when you're moving, your body's hot, and it seems to keep the feet warm, even if the shoes are wet. They often do dry out, not typically at night. Nothing really dries out overnight, so it'll be wet in the morning, but once you start moving, your feet kind of dry out, your shoes dry out, and you're ready to go stomp through another creek. It would be the same if it was just raining on you and you got your feet wet that way. It's not really a concern until the temperatures start getting colder. And when that's the case, you would like to keep your feet dry. So what a common customer would do, and something that I've done multiple times, you get a shoe like this. So this is a Gore-tex version of the Salomon Ultra II. This is the low profile shoe. I've had two pairs of these. I also have I've also had the mid version of this shoe. I think it's a great shoe for a lot of reasons, but long-term waterproof durability is not one of those reasons. I don't think it's Salomon's fault. I think that the technology has a fundamental weakness. Waterproof shoes only work for a couple hundred miles. It's not the material, it's not Gore-Tex's fault, it's not Salomon's fault. It's just the nature of a shoe. I had done a similar review, or not similar, but I had done a review on the Merrell Moab waterproof shoe, and it fails. This shoe is still in good shape. I've got less than a couple hundred miles on this shoe, but they fail just like everybody else in the same spots, whether it's the low profile or the mid, or another brand, or a competitor to Gore-Tex. It doesn't matter. It's just physics. It's just material science. Shoe's always going to fail in the spot. If it's a fabric material like this, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So a shoe like this, let's see, I'm in Ohio right now, Cleveland, Ohio, and say I wanted to go stomp around in some slush for a couple days, I would have no problem wearing this shoe. I think it would last, and it has lasted me over 24 hours of consecutive dryness. So what I mean, up in Oregon, I walked through heavy, non-stop, all-day rain. Shoe was dry at night, dry in the morning when I kept it in my tent, went out to walk. Couple hours into the next day, the shoe started to get saturated. That was when it was in good health, right from the store. Less than 100 miles at that point. The shoe was working good. Even then, it started to get saturated on the second day of continuous rain. And I'm talking non-stop rain, puddles, everything. It was good, but sure enough, by the time I got to a couple hundred miles, it started to develop the typical wear tears that you would see in any shoe, whether it was waterproof or not. And at that point, it lost its waterproof value. So for what does that mean for maybe a casual hiker or a weekend warrior type? A shoe like this is going to be okay, honestly, so long as you just use it for the first couple hundred miles. And I know that probably isn't what you're expecting to hear or would hope for. I know I would have not thought in the past couple years when I've purchased this shoe that it would have such a short lifespan, but it really does make sense that the shoe's just going to fail like they all do. And that becomes a problem when you start talking about snow. So that's where a shoe like this comes in. So this is a Bogs Ultra Mid, good old-fashioned rubber boot. I had never heard of this in my entire life. I don't know, maybe I had. You know, the cow milkers use these because the floor gets slick. But I was out on the PCT in the Northern Washington section, and I didn't finish until October 24th. There was a lot of snow that year, and it was about mid-October, I believe, when the snow started falling, and I happened to be up by Stehekin, which is where North Cascades National Park is, and storm was coming through, and I found myself in a position where I wanted to continue hiking, so I consulted with a local ranger who had decades of experience working in not just up in Alaska, but in northern Washington. So some serious element exposure. And I asked him, what do I need to wear to go out there, man? Because these shoes aren't cutting it. And he definitely agreed. Had to be boots, and he just said no, without even thinking about it, go get the Bogs. So I went to a hardware store. I bought these things, and these kept me dry. I was walking in feet of snow for days. I actually used these in snowshoes. I'll put a little video clip up there somewhere of me walking with these things in snowshoes. They work great. They're amazing. They're versatile. You might think that they're not fit for tough terrain, but they've actually got a pretty good tread on it. They hold well walking over rocks. They're not the best, but they do a pretty good job of traction. And support was good. I mean, the elevation changes, you cover thousands of feet in short time frame, and then even towards the end I was kind of just walking over flat land. right at the border of Canada, and these things were just fantastic. I mean, puddles. The only moisture you get inside is from your sweat on your feet. It's truly rubber, and again, that makes sense. I found with outdoor clothing, whether we're talking about waterproofness or we're talking about warmth, there's no substitute for the common sense solutions. There's nothing that's going to be designed in a lab to keep fabric waterproof forever or even compete with rubber. And kind of the same thing with the ultralight warmth and things of that nature. But I think that if you are going out for multiple days in cold, approaching freezing conditions, it just can't be done in a shoe if there's water involved. It has to be some type of boot. Personally, I can't speak to the quality of leather boots. I've used leather boots in working conditions. I actually worked for UPS, put waterproof materials on it, but every night I'd bring them home and they'd be in a warm house and they'd kind of dry off that way, or mostly dry. I can't speak to them in wilderness settings. They've done okay for me. They got to be really freaking heavy to be used out there. This Bogs boot is pretty lightweight. I personally, I'm going to use it a heck of a lot more moving forward on just regular kind of outings, just to keep my feet dry. It's not really that pleasant when they get wet and you're hiking for multiple days. That's kind of the short and sweet of what I have to say here. I mean, in summary, if it's warm outside, don't really worry about it. If you're particular, you're going for a short distance, waterproof socks are a great solution. Just can't stretch that out over multiple days. As it gets colder, sure, Gore-tex shoes are going to work, but you need to have those replaced every couple hundred miles. That's not necessarily an issue for most customers. People don't always use their hiking boots or put big miles on their hiking boots. I guess it just depends on you, the person. If you're a serious hiker, you hike a lot, doing multiple day trips, you're getting your feet wet, and it's cold, and it's, 40, 50, temperatures approaching freezing. The rubber boot, man. Whether it's Bogs or a competitor, you just can't beat a rubber boot. There's just no way around it. That's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening. Check the other gear reviews. I'm going to start covering a lot of the equipment that I used and enjoyed and has really worked well for me on the hike of the Pacific Crest Trail last year. So, good night.